and Betsy McCaughey Skyping in with us. Miranda, I'll leave the questions to you and the opining to Betsy right now.
Let's talk about Casey Hickox. What are your thoughts on that, Betsy? Because she said she didn't show any signs of a fever, but you just stated earlier there's some research saying that you may not show signs of a fever ever and still contract Ebola. She hired a team of lawyers. Really, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, of course, it's very noble what she did, and we do pay tribute to all of those volunteers who have gone to Africa. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be quarantined on the way home. In fact, I was truly shocked when Tom Frieden, in his press conference yesterday, Tom Frieden, head of the CDC, said that we shouldn't isolate returning healthcare workers because it would make them into pariahs, that was his word, and impose a stigma, that was his word again, on them. That is the most unscientific attitude toward quarantine. Quarantine is one of the most effective tools in our toolbox, and for a trained epidemiologist to suggest that quarantining someone makes them a pariah or imposes a stigma is just really out of the 12th century.
Well, Betsy, I think the controversy, though, was over where she was being quarantined. They didn't like the idea that she was being quarantined in this tent at a hospital. Well, and she said she was going to voluntarily be quarantined.
That's because the CDC, the do-nothing agency, really left the states on their own to respond in haste when presented with a problem they didn't anticipate. Now, the tent did not look that inviting, but let's be civil about this. She wasn't being tortured, and sometimes we have to put up with things like that for a few hours until better accommodations can be provided. Frankly, I was sympathetic to her. She was taken aback by surprise. She expected to have a nice homecoming. But I do think that it's very important that we put the health of the public ahead of the comforts of newly arrived healthcare workers. We should pay tribute to them, but also keep them isolated from the general public for that 21 days, even if they've worn protective gear, because we know that is not a foolproof way to protect them.
We've got about 2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining, Betsy. Hearing Josh Earnest, hearing all this talk about heroes, okay, fine and good, but the Apollo 11 astronauts came back from the moon, and they spent, about a month in quarantine after they got home. They were heroes, and moreover, to the point about the tent in the hospital parking lot, I would imagine that the nurse in question didn't exactly stay in a five-star hotel during her time in Sierra Leone and West Africa when she was treating patients to begin with. Why this notion of victimhood in the midst of what could be a serious epidemic in the United States?
Well, I agree, and I certainly don't think it's appropriate to threaten to sue. States have always had the power to isolate those who might, you don't have to prove it, who might pose a risk to public health, and that's what was done in this case. Now, moving on to the soldiers, it's very important that they be quarantined. I think that the Joint Chiefs of Staff have taken the right approach, especially soldiers who are stationed in other countries. Can you imagine the ill will, the danger, if our American soldiers who have served nobly in West Africa are then returned to a base in another country and infect the local populace? I can't think of anything worse than that.
Also news today, we heard about Amber Vinson, that she's now Ebola-free and was going to be released from Emory University. Her case kind of sparks concern.
She may get a hug from the president.
She did. Sparked so much concern about quarantine and flying on planes. What's your reaction? Because it seemed like a lot of these healthcare workers that went overseas to help people fighting Ebola, for some reason or another, decided they're going to go on a cruise, they're going to be in a plane. What's your reaction to this?
Got about 30 seconds, Betsy.
My reaction is that the wisest step would have been to prevent them from flying on commercial flights until they had already undergone a 21-day quarantine. As you can see, the country of Austria just announced its new policy, which requires people to isolate before they get on a plane and come to Austria.
So Austria's got a travel ban in place.
Let me just ask you folks, if you're going on a holiday, would you like to sit on your flight next to a doctor or nurse who has just nobly spent the previous month treating Ebola patients.
Not unless
How do you
they'd been
feel
in
about
quarantine, Betsy. That's exactly the point. Hey, listen, as always, we thank you for your plain talk and common sense. Betsy McCaughey, PhD. There's more ahead here on America's Forum.